This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is a wasteland. Deep in its valleys of iron and steel, superbugs wreak havoc.
Who's up for some laughs?
The only hope for the future is the new Batman on the block.
Let's go!
Batman Beyond. Justice returns to Gotham.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 314 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our social media accounts, Liam, our other host. Welcome back to the land of the living after a historic, for all the wrong reasons, episode last week. We are back with the darkened, more serious skies of Gotham, although this episode does not take place in Gotham. But we are once again back to review more Batman Beyond, picking things up where we left off with our cliffhanger episode 2 weeks ago. Call Part 1. Liam, we are here to review the Call Part 2 today.
That's right. Picking up right where we left off, Terry is smack dab in the middle of his first big Justice League adventure, and we're smack dab in the middle of visiting the first, in actual production order, the first ever Justice League adventure of any kind in the DCAU. So an exciting one as we cap it off with the Call Part 2. We got a lot to get to, so I'll get us to our official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode.
That's right, Liam. And of course, before we do that, we must remind the listeners at home, the official IMDb synopsis is brought to you by the Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower today and subscribe. Not only will you get our official home of YouTube podcasts. Wait, let me say that again. Not only is it our official YouTube home for our podcast library, every episode we've done previously, including bonus episodes and our little spin-off episodes, all are homed right there, but you also get additional podcasts from our friends over at the Watchtower database as they put on a weekly podcast of their own called Jump on the Bat-Wagon. That podcast is currently ongoing. And then, of course, you get the entire Tim Talk library all in one convenient streaming location. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower and subscribe today.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for The Call Part 2, which was written by Alan Burnett, Paul Dini, with teleplay by Stan Berkowitz, directed by Butch Lukic, with music by Christopher Carter, and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. This might be the best one ever. The identity of the traitor is revealed, which set the stage for a confrontation.
Oh, my God. Whew. All right. Feeling great.
It sets the stage.
It
sets the stage. I guess Bizarro wrote this one.
By the way, this episode originally debuted, I did not mention, on November the 18th, 2000, meaning we're coming up on the 24-year anniversary of this pod, or of this episode debuting here in just a few months after the original air date of this pod. Yeah, so Liam, we pick things up where we left off at the end of part 2. We have a nice little recap reminding us just what happened and where our cliffhanger left us. And we pick things up with Batman reviewing the incriminating footage of Superman destroying the bomb, which apparently has killed Warhawk. And it's almost too much for everyone to bear, including Barda, who is still extremely suspicious of Batman. She believes that despite video and technically photographic evidence of Superman being the one responsible, she has no reason to trust him and no reason to trust his Batmobile footage, seeing as how she knows less about it than she does him.
I don't believe it.
It is hard to accept, Barda, but...
No, I mean, I don't believe this thing.
It came straight off the Batmobile's recorder.
And that's supposed to convince me? I know even less about your vehicle than I do about you.
What reason would I have to make up any of this?
What reason would Superman have to kill Warhawk? It's easier for me to believe you fabricated this.
Listen, lady, I never asked to be part of this club. You people came to me.
It was only Superman who came to you. And now you're accusing him of murder. It doesn't make sense.
I know it doesn't, but we're never gonna get to the bottom of it unless you open your eyes and stop being so pig-headed.
Pig-headed? Let go of me, Lantern.
Not until you calm down.
So she is being very confrontational with Batman once again, attempts to attack him after he called her pig-headed, probably the wrong word to say to a warrior such as Barda.
It's fighting words.
Correct. And thankfully, Cairo steps in and is able to restrain her from further attacks. But it's in the midst of this as Aquagirl is helping Batman up that Barda and everyone, as they're calming down from this initial argument here, they hear a familiar voice, that being Warhawk. And we get the bait and switch here, Liam. It's like the Chewbacca in the Rise of Skywalker bit here. No, he's dead. Oh, just kidding. He's not. We got you for those 15 seconds.
This is one of those ones that it works, I suppose, if you had to wait 7 days for this reveal.
Correct.
But if you watch these episodes back to back on the DVDs, which obviously we didn't for the purposes of how we review them, but it's like, if you watch this right after the other one, he is dead for 90 seconds. And a lot of that is the intro and the credits.
So it takes the wind out of the proverbial sails for that, or the impact out of that. But yes, Warhawk is alive. Everyone rejoices. And it's at that point that Batman sort of gets his first ally on the team, as Warhawk admits that he too believes something was up. He remote control operated his armor from afar and was attempting to
Boo.
on his own. He told Batman to stay back because he believed there was something afoot. Batman didn't listen and rebelled, and he appreciates that. He says he disobeyed. I liked that. So it's nice to see Warhawk in his DNA appreciates a little bit of rebellion. I'm sure he probably gets that from his mother's side. Then we begin trying to put the pieces together just as to what is going on here, as the heroes all band together, and they're big mad at this point, and they're going to get to step in and give Superman what for as they all confront him. Superman is in the room and hanging out. He's in
the room from The Empire Strikes Back, and we see Micron in the back of the tank.
Right. Precisely, yes. Micron is in the tank, and Superman is messing with the levels, unsure of what he's doing. He's interrupted, though, as the heroes begin to confront him, all with... they're not very tactful in how they accuse him, and he's clearly very irritated at first, but tries to play it off, continuing, kind of just repeating his lines that there's a traitor amongst them, and that he brought Batman in to try and find that traitor.
Superman! Warhawk, you're all right. No thanks to you.
Not yet.
What's going on?
We were hoping you could tell us, Cal.
Starting with what you were doing just now when we came in.
I was adjusting Micron's stasis field.
Sorry to be contentious, but that stasis field never needs adjustment. It runs on Micron's biofeedback.
So what were you really trying to do, hero? Finish him off like you tried with me? I don't know what you're talking about, but I do know there's a traitor here, and I've been trying to find out who it is. That's why I brought him in.
You did bring me in, but that doesn't make you innocent.
Now I understand. It wasn't one of you that betrayed the League. It was all of you. You're all traitors.
Cal, you know I'd never betray you, or anyone else who's ever fought at my side. But something's wrong.
Nothing's wrong.
Please, let us help.
And It's at this point, Marina steps forward because Superman begins accusing all of them of being traitors. And Marina steps forward and she sort of puts her hand out to try and calm him down. And in the midst of it, something bursts from Superman's chest in quite frightening manner. And it's at that point Superman really does become combative outside of just verbally. It's a fighting time as all hell breaks loose and Superman begins to take on the rest of the Leaguers, and that kicks off what will be pretty much nonstop action for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, just about. So they have a little bit of a tussle. Terry has the sliver of kryptonite that Bruce gave him at the end of the last episode. He hesitates for a moment, and it actually gets knocked down into a little air vent or storm drain or something. Wouldn't you know it? And so Superman continues to wreak havoc. We actually see Micron break out of his back to tank and attempts to capture Superman in his giant fist, but Superman is. Does Superman's suit have the spike power, or is that Starro?
I think it was. I'm going to say it was Starro.
Okay, that would make more sense. Although I want to say in one of the Tim Burton, or maybe the Kevin Smith Superman, he was going to have like a silver S that he like threw that had knives on it or something.
Oh
so
no!
I didn't know if this was like a weird reference to that, but yeah, somehow Superman has some sort of defense against being grabbed by Micron, and is able to defeat him, and sort of flies away as right then Batman's able to grab onto the kryptonite, and he retreats, and as they discuss things among themselves, they decide that he must have gone back to the Fortress of Solitude, as there are no news reports about any sightings of him all around the world. But they're concerned as none of them have ever been to the fortress and don't know where it is. But luckily, Terry knows a guy who knows a guy who does in fact know where it is. So Bruce cluing them in, they boom tube over to the fortress using Barda's mother box, and they arrive inside the fortress. They're walking through. We see I guess this would be, again, in production order, in real world timeline. This is the first appearance of the Jor-El and Lara holding up the world statue, I think.
It was ice. It was made of ice before, I think, wasn't it? I think it's in the Bizarro episode.
Oh, is it in that one?
Okay. I'm pretty sure it's in the Bizarro episode because Bizarro replicates it. Or is it in maybe the man? Oh, are you talking about like? Because it's definitely in for the man who has everything, right? It's
that
in one
is yes. It's larger, and they're like painted blue, like it's made of ice or something. But
so that's where I'm seeing it. Yeah, it's not in that. Now Bizarro does have his own version of that.
Yes, he does. Although and it's something from the comics, but I was trying to think if we'd seen it on screen.
I don't think we had.
Let us know at DCAU Review on the site formerly known as Twitter or Instagram. Let us know if he has that in Superman or not. But yes, as they're walking around, they walk through the old intergalactic zoo. Batman gets a little startled by a familiar snake that we saw in the Main Man, and wouldn't you know it, one of the sanctuaries, one of the little cages, is open, and there is some evidence that there was a creature that was once inside, but no longer is, as Batman finds some duty. And at that point, they seemingly are confronted by Superman, but it turned out to be one of his robot duplicates. They were really they took a lot from Legacy in this episode, huh? Like the whole this isn't the first time Superman turned bad, and then his robot duplicates, which we never really. I guess we see him in A Better World. I was like, we never really see them again either. Like he doesn't use them a lot in Justice League, but I guess Justice Lord Superman did. But anyway, they fight a couple of Superman robots, defeat them before the real Superman reveals himself. This time, Terry is quick enough to grab the kryptonite and knock him out with that. Warhawk still very gung-ho with the idea of just killing Superman at this point. But the rest of the League convinces him that they need to see what this thing is on his chest. And there's where we get the official reveal that it is, in fact, Starro the Conqueror, although he's not ever referred to as that in this episode. It's a big starfish with one eye that has attached itself to Superman's chest. We get some exposition from Green Lantern on like the physiology of it. He's embedded into Superman's skin and has some sort of psychic control over him. And then using her marine life telepathy, which apparently includes non-earthbound
intergalactic sea life.
I think that's fair. Like Beast Boy can turn into animals from other planets, so why couldn't the Aqua family talk to sea creatures from other planets, I guess. But so we get Aquagirl does our big flashback where we get to see some slightly reused or re-edited footage from The Main Man, parts 1 and 2, where we find out that the Collector, or the Preserver, stole Starro from his home planet.
The creature had never seen anything like the Traveler's vehicle. It never occurred to him to be afraid, until it was too late. He soon realized that the Traveler was a collector, a preserver of different species from all over the universe, the last of their kind. Time and again, the creature tried to escape, but it wasn't strong enough. Years passed. The preserver grew overconfident. He took someone into a zoo who was too strong even for him. It was Superman.
Really rewriting history. Just wrote Lobo completely out of this flashback. Starro was not a fan of Lobo, I guess, so he didn't include him in the recap.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, we see a little bit of the battle between Superman and the big preserver crab man that he turns into at the end of that episode, and then that Superman took all of the animals back, not knowing what else to do with them, not knowing where all of these animals came from. He takes them back and feeds them, takes care of them. And Starro longed for its freedom, and so it sees a chance. It hops onto Superman's face and begins to control him. And it now has a plan of how it's not just going to control Superman; it wants to control the world. and we also get a bit of dialogue, which implies, or not implies, just straight up says, this starfish has been on Superman for years. You could say that's 2 years, but that's still a long time. But at least they did. There's actually a funny thing. There's a little featurette about this episode where Bruce Timm thought that line meant that Starro had been on him since like Superman the Animated Series. But in the flashback they show, it is very clearly he's got the gray temples and the black and silver suit. So it wasn't that long ago.
I had a like a Mandela effect type thing where for some reason I thought it showed him in his red and blue and yellow being attacked. So I was like, this is why this episode I always just kind of like dismiss it. It's like you can't dismiss it as non-canon, but it's like, this is kind of, that part's really dumb.
Yes.
Like, I've been on him for years. Like, he's been on him since who knows when, like weeks after he came back from, like, that's a bad line.
And it's funny. There's a bit of a back and forth between Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, and they're like, well, if that was the case, we would say it was like after Justice League and JLU and all of that. It's like, or like he wore the red and blue suit until like a year before Batman Beyond started, and that's so it hasn't been that long. But thankfully, yes, in the actual flashback where he's getting attacked, he is in the black and silver suit. You do see the classic Superman suit briefly when they flash back to the Main Man episode, but so maybe that's where
maybe
the
Starro
Mandela effect
also
comes in.
Maybe Starro being an interdimension or intergalactic species, also their years are different than Earth years.
Could be.
So it's communicating this story to Aquagirl. Maybe it's saying years, but it was really months because years are different on its planet. That's my headcanon, because
I like it. It's like Yoda rules. It's like he's like 1,000 years old, but he's but 100 years old. The baby one is like 100 years old, but he's also still a baby.
Right. Yes.
The rules don't always apply like they do to us mere mortals. But yes, we reveal the plan, which is that they open up this room where there's a bunch of water and a big door, and the plan is they're going to open this door that's going to release all of these millions of starfish that we see all over this ice cave into the sea under the polar ice caps, and they're going to just cover the whole world in little starfish and control the whole world, apparently. And as the Justice League, completely unaware, I guess, of how the mind control works, they just kind of walk around in the room staring, and are therefore woefully unprepared when starfish jump onto all of their faces. Aquagirl, Barda, Warhawk, and Green Lantern right through his energy field thing. He's floating, but it
didn't know how that happened.
Gets on him.
Yeah.
What are the rules there? But yes, all of the Justice League, of course, including Superman now taken over. Batman's able to resist it because of the suit, and also because he has one of those powers he remembers the suit has that he almost never uses. He has, like, he could just electrify himself whenever he wants. And so he's able to avoid that, but he's still sort of a sitting duck as the rest of the league attempts to attack him. And he's able to use a flash grenade to get away, get himself a little bit of distance, and sees that Bruce has sent him the Batmobile. But, he can't get that much difference when there's a certain Man of Steel on his tail.
Right. His first question is Mach 3 faster than a speeding bullet? Because he's got to outrun him.
Everything okay?
Not really, but thanks for sending my ride for me.
I never did like those boom tubes.
And now those starfish things are on all of them. Any ideas?
All I can do is have Barbara contact the military.
But they'll bomb the place.
That's their job.
What's the top speed on this thing?
Mach 3.
Is that faster than a speeding bullet?
Unfortunately, we learned very quickly that Mach 3 is not faster than a speeding bullet, because Superman is able to catch up with and disable the Batmobile, and the Batmobile crashes into the Arctic snow. And just when it seems like Batman is in for it at that point, Superman offers him a deal, saying that he wants him to come back to join them, and that it appears that Batman is prepared to surrender. But of course, he's playing possum, as just at the last second as Superman's about to take him in, he ducks out of the way. Batman ducks out of the way, and there is launched from the Batmobile a gigantic grapple claw that's also electrified, that begins pulling Superman in and electrifying.
The old Batmobile harpoon.
That's right, exactly. It's does its job.
It's very effective.
Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned it initially, but part of the things, once they take Superman out, there was some hesitancy of just pulling the Starro off of him, because it's like, well, we don't know what could happen. Batman says at this point, he's throwing up a Hail Mary. He has no other choice. So he rips the Starro creature, as it's electrifying it, rips it off of Superman. Superman is able to break free. Pretty cool sequence we'll talk about in visuals. And to this point, Superman awakens. Even though Batman wasn't sure if he was perhaps dead, he does in fact regain consciousness. None the wiser as to what's happened. Batman offers to fill him in on everything that's been going on the way back, which sort of, I want to believe that Superman had semi-consciousness in between, like bits of consciousness in between all of this, which is why he recruited Batman. And he does recognize Batman, so it's not like he doesn't know who Batman is. So right. I don't know. Anyway, so on the way back, they devise a plan as Superman walks back into the fortress, as we see the rest of the League who are discussing their plan. They're going to release all of the Starros into the ocean, and then they will then be able to swim and disperse throughout the world. and take over the world. Because there's enough spores now that that I guess they're going to outnumber the humans, or they're going to continue to, reproduce in the meantime. So, all that we have to do is there's a valve that Aquagirl can open up that opens up a set of doors at the base of the Fortress of Solitude, and just as they're discussing whether or not if she's able to open it by herself, Superman walks in with Batman over his shoulder.
This pool feeds directly into the water below the ice cap. There's a steel door down there blocking the passage.
Can you open it by yourself? Superman. Is he with us?
Not yet.
We can fix that.
Wait. Something's not right. Put him down.
Of course.
At that point, the Batman and Superman spring into action as they begin fighting the rest of the Justice League in an attempt to free them from Starro's mind grasp. And a couple of Leaguers are freed with relative ease. We get Barda, who's freed first, and then we get Warhawk and Superman kind of go at it a little bit in another sequence we'll probably talk about. All the while, they're continuing to try and reattach Starros to both Batman and Superman. So they're having to try and detach the Starros while also avoid getting attacked by the other Starro creatures in the area. They are able to free the Green Lantern, who then in turn helps them. And it's just down to Aquagirl, who jumps in to the tank and swims down with an apparent option to try and open up the gate to let the Starros free. Batman jumps in after, as Superman and the rest of the Leaguers are sort of recovering still. He jumps in, goes under the water, has a little bit of a tussle with her. Another really, really neat sequence where he gets completely overwhelmed by just hundreds of Starros. He's able to break free. Aquagirl makes it to the doors, begins opening the doors. Superman recognizes what her plan is, so he decides that he has to do everything he can to stop it. So he begins trimming some of the, I guess it's not, they're ice chunks. They're parts of the glacier, I guess, that they're in, off of the ceiling, and he cuts him free, and they begin falling into the water in an attempt to block the gate. Meanwhile, Batman is still submerged, doing battle with the still under the influence of Starro Marina. They're doing hand-to-hand combat in the meantime, and dodging rocks in the process. They both get crushed by a rock, and it's interesting because Barda calls out to Superman saying that Batman, the only person she mentions that's still down there is Batman. And Superman says that he knew the risks by joining the team, so he's prepared to do whatever it takes to stop. So Barda at that point didn't have time to care for too long, because she joins in on throwing rocks down in an attempt to block the way to prevent the Starros from escaping. Eventually, Batman is able to overcome and defeat Marina, and is able to get out from the tank and get her to the surface. And just as the tank is blocked, preventing somehow none of the Starros escaped. If we were planning for a sequel or a follow-up episode, maybe you would have cut back with a post-credit scene of one like floating away, but apparently none managed to escape, despite the door seemingly beginning to open up. So the final Starro is ripped off of Marina's face, and it's at that point that we kind of get our finale to the episode, as all of the Starros have been collected and put into a bottle.
Where should I boom them to? Some empty galaxy? Or maybe the surface of the sun?
Barda, these creatures never asked to come here. We have no right to kill them.
Back to his old self again.
We should send them home.
But how do we know where that is?
Barda, let me see your mother box.
At that point, Barda and Warhawk are talking about what can we do and how should we torture and or destroy these creatures. Superman decides that it's not their fault that they were brought to this Earth. They didn't want to be here. So he wants to be kind to them in true Superman fashion, signaling to Warhawk that he's back to his normal self. He decides that he wants to return them to his home. So Marina, using her telepathy once again, finds out somehow which world they came from, and using Barda's mother box, they are able to boom them back to their home planet safely. So now more than one Starro exists. So there's a whole family of Starros. He left his home planet and alone, and then comes back with a whole family. So good for Starro. And that's where we.
I guess we forgive him for trying to take over the entire Earth.
Yeah, thanks, Starro. We apologize. I don't know. You're not really that evil. That's the thing. Like in the comics and even in the most recent Suicide Squad movie, the whole thing was Starro is evil. Like he's trying to take over the world, and I thought they did a pretty good job here of setting up like, hey, he's trying to take over the world, but maybe they figure, well, it's not like he has a ship and can figure out how to get back to Earth. So he's the galaxy's problem at this point, I guess. I don't know. But we do get a nice little bow put on the episode, Liam, as things begin to wrap up with a conversation and an offer from the Leaguers directly to Batman himself.
Well, kid, I gotta admit, I was wrong about you.
An understatement. You saved the world.
Think you can get used to it?
You're saying you want me with you full time?
We could really use you.
I don't know. You guys play awfully rough.
Come on. It'll put you one up on the old Batman. He never made it past part-timer.
Yeah, he wasn't what you'd call a joiner.
Maybe he and I have something in common after all.
More than you think, son. More than you think.
That's right. So as they all sort of are glad-handing and appreciating that Terry, not just is he Justice League material, but in fact he single-handedly saved the world in this case. They want to offer him full-time member in the Justice League. Even Barda mentioning, speaking of annoying bits of continuity that must carry over for the future shows, they mentioned that the original Batman never made it past part-timer status.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would actually have a leg up on Bruce if he accepts the invite. But Terry decides to turn it down and says that he thinks that perhaps he and Bruce have a bit more in common than he initially thought. And as he's walking away, you hear Superman say, "More than you think, son." And what could that mean?
Yeah, it's
we'll
a good
never
question.
know.
One day
the world may never know, as the L from the Tootsie Pop ad said.
That's true.
Or the kid in the Tootsie Pop ad. Whoever said that in the ad. I think it's the kid. Anyway, yes, that is obviously an allusion to a plot point which was thought of back during the production of Batman Beyond and was maybe planned for a second straight-to-DVD movie that never happened and then was later resurrected in Epilogue. But, of course, we will get to that one way down the road there. That's where we leave it today. As Batman has his adventure, his globe-trotting adventure with the Justice League, decides he's better off staying local to Gotham City for the time being. But it's clear he's earned the respect of heroes, even heroes that worked with his predecessor. So that's where we leave things for this week.
That's right. So where we last left off, Liam, we both had a 6 as far as our plot scores are concerned. For our temporary scores, our placeholder scores from part 1. So all of our scores here going forward are going to end up being our final scores for both parts in total. So I like that this episode, like the first episode, has a lot to set up and did feel a bit contrived when we were talking about it 2 weeks ago. Oh man, our lives were so different 2 weeks ago. Way before we watched that Zeta Project episode last week. A simpler time. So I think we talked a little bit about it being a little bit goofy. The setup for everything was a little bit much. Batman was being bullied for seemingly no reason. other than just to create some sort of like friction between him and the Leaguers. I guess maybe looking back at it now, it is to sort of set up maybe one of these other people are the traitors, and that's why they're not so warm and fuzzy. Guess I didn't think about that 2 weeks ago, but that's immediately resolved within about 3 minutes here. We get a little bit more of the bullying and the fighting and Barda being mean for seemingly no reason. And then once Warhawk comes back and sticks up for Batman, suddenly Batman's accepted again. Well, that and the video evidence that they have of Superman trying to kill Warhawk, I guess, is the other thing that does it. But so I do like the idea that you take this classic Justice League villain who we talked about was not, I guess they were kind of prohibited from using it in the JLU and JL runs because of the continuity. And if this is the first interaction, I guess you could have had them interact with a Starro creature, some of the other members that aren't Superman or Batman or Barda, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the Preserver, it's been a few years since we watched that one, is that everything he had was the last. That's why he wanted Superman, and that's why he takes Lobo as well, is because he's the last Sarnian.
Right.
So I think the idea would be that Starro is by himself, although apparently he can reproduce asexually.
Yes.
So what? Maybe he has to be in a big pool of water to do that, and Superman only gave him a little bit of water. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. But either way, it would have been if he was in Superman's zoo cage until the Beyond Suit era. You couldn't have like unless you were to then tell the story that the Preserver didn't actually get the last Starro, only it was a mistake or whatever. Yeah, which would have been dumb. So, but I like this way of using Starro, a classic JL villain from the comics. We talked a little bit about while we were doing the plot, Superman having it on him for a couple of years is a little bit goofy also, but it can be explained away in a couple of different ways, I suppose. But I mean, it really, I do like that they tied it into Superman, the animated series. So they're doing something here that they would obviously do a lot more of once they got to the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited runs. But it seemed like that we know that they intentionally shied away from doing whatever happened to this character's, backstory until, Return of the Joker or some of those other ones, an occasional cameo from someone, but Mr. Freeze, but you didn't really have a whole lot of follow up from that stuff. So I do like that you're really tying this together as the same universe, making it feel important that you watch the entire thing, which is why we're doing this podcast. So I think overall I ended up settling. I bumped it up a point. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think it is in total when you're looking at both episodes. This episode has a ton of action. It's nearly wall-to-wall action. Even that little fight at the beginning between Batman and Barda, and then Superman obviously doing a little bit of talking there, but once he is found out fighting the League, and then him getting to fight Batman later on, Batman versus the entire Justice League, all of that is super fun. And as a kid, you're watching that and you're like, man, this is really, really awesome. And it kind of still holds up, I think. I think the tension of that final scene with Batman trying to fight and save Marina, who he sort of has this somewhat flirty relationship with, would seem.
He's the only one who's not an out and out dick to him. So.
Right, precisely. So he's like trying to save her. Meanwhile, he's like literally dodging rocks that are falling from the sky to, in an attempt to try and save her. So yeah, I think that giving it a 7 out of 10 is not perfect. There's certainly some things that are a bit goofy and if you think about it too hard, don't make a lot of sense. But I think it's for the 44-minute or 43-minute runtime or whatever it ends up being, it's a fun episode. So that's why I ended up giving 7 out of 10.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't think this is disagreement alarm worthy. I ended up taking mine 1 point lower than I think where I was. I think I settled at a 5 for my final score across the two parts. I really liked a lot of the setup in part one. I liked the mystery sort of espionage that like Terry's been brought in. The rest of the league doesn't know why he's there. He's been tasked with Superman to find this traitor, and then in the meantime, he's also trying to prove himself that he belongs there. And then you get the big reveal at the end of part one that it's actually Superman himself who's the traitor. It's like, okay, that's really interesting. And then it's just all starfish in part two. It's just so much of it is it's just punchy bits, and they're fun. And I'll certainly talk about that more in visuals in a couple of minutes. But it's just Superman after this 2-year odyssey where he's been slowly, methodically building his time. They're just like, "Hey, Superman, you're acting weird," and he's like, "Well, fine. I have a starfish on my chest. Are you happy now?" Like he just gives up. He just gives up the goat immediately, and attacks them all. And again, sometimes things happen as we often joke about because the next scene has to happen. So in this case, there's little nuggets in it. I like the idea that Bruce knows where the fortress is. Like it's not a commonly known thing. It's not like there's a museum there or a landmark where people know to go for this, but
right.
So I like that little bit of it. I love Bruce sending the Batmobile even though they travel through the boom tube, just because he's like something's gonna happen here,
right?
Like I don't know what's gonna happen here, but I don't like those boom tubes. So I like that little bit. I like Bruce's little bits of paranoia. I think that's part of the thing too. Is part one features a lot of, as we talked about when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, of Terry and Bruce kind of working this case together and working through the mystery. And then because they reveal the mystery, they reveal all doubt within 90 seconds of this episode starting. There's less use for Bruce in here. So other than a few lines of dialogue bounced off between him and Terry, I feel like there's less for him to do this week. But overall I still like it. It's a fun adventure. Them not just blowing up all of the aliens and slaughtering them, and actually and them kind of using teamwork of Aquagirl making contact and then using Barda's mother box to send the creature home after this all this time in captivity. Like that's a nice little moment of hey, we're at the end of the day, we're the good guys, and we're gonna make things right, even if it wasn't really our fault that it was that this starfish creature was wronged in the first place. We're gonna make it right for them, and we don't have to punish them. So yeah, I think there's some nice stuff in it. The way it wraps up with Terry seemingly being so starstruck at the start of part one to now sort of accepting the Batman-ness of like how Batman's attitude towards team ups always is, it seems. Like he's I feel like you show a lot of growth for Terry, so I do like that. But I think overall, just for part two, I missed the kind of the sleuthing and the mystery and the what's going on. Like once it's revealed that it's just like, oh, he's got a starfish on his face, and now there's a million starfish, and they're gonna drop him into the ocean. It's like, okay, this is Super Friends now. Like it starts to feel like a little simplistic at that point to me. So overall, there's definitely some stuff I liked in it, but I ended up coming down to a 5, just a little less excited by part two from a plot standpoint.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I would also critique the fact that they give up the mystery so early on. So that the idea that they didn't make Warhawk's return feel a little bit more impactful is
that too. The remote control piloting is bull honky. It was like 3 seconds between when we see him when we clearly see him in the suit, and then when it blows, and
he's like 50 stories up, by the way.
Yes.
So
like, okay, well, where were you? And also, why didn't you reveal? Like, why did you wait to reveal yourself? Did you see Superman shoot you? It didn't appear that way,
right?
Because he walks in on like the footage being aired. So unless the idea is while he was piloting it in the 5 seconds, he somehow saw the heat. Maybe he has eyes like a hawk, I guess. So from where he was up in the sky, he looked down and saw that this red beam was coming up, and he could see that it was Superman. I don't know. But I'm nitpicking a little bit now. But yeah,
That's okay.
the remote control armor bit, I was like, boo, that's dumb.
That's very lame. Yeah, I think they actually in that feature from the Blu-ray, they call that out as being a dumb thing to do. So
A little bit, yeah.
all right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And who did this one again? Was this Coco
This is
again?
Coco and Dong Yang again,
Dong.
I believe, and Butch Lukic as the director.
There we go. All right, so I'll be interested to hear whether or not our scores change for this. So our original scores for this were both 8s, based on last week's episode and last 2 weeks ago's episode, the part 1 of this. A lot of that was based on that Justice League action sequence that we talked about that kind of set the table for what we would come to know as pretty regular occurrence once it graduated to Justice League and Justice League Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
This week you don't have as much of that team element out in the wild type action. You do have them fighting off both. You have the Leaguers fighting amongst themselves. So you have a brief scuffle between Batman and Barda, and then you have Superman versus the rest of the Justice League that occurs once the jig is up. I do like the preamble to that, and I think the explanation for Superman giving up the ghost so quick is because Marina got close enough for the Starro maybe to not. My headcanon would be her telepathy somehow interacted and that scared the Starro or whatever, thought that,
That's fair.
Which is why its eye pops out in that really, that's like something out of Alien or something like that. Yeah, it's like the Superman's uniform rips open, the eye is the only thing that bursts out, you see it, and then it scurries away under his skin in a very, very creepy way. So that's that. I do like that bit. Like, she goes to put her hand out and that thing bursts right through it. It's like, all right, that's straight out of Alien. That's a pretty cool visual there that they borrowed.
And, yeah, it's definitely one also, like, it's hard to put yourself back in the mind if you've seen this before because it's such a memorable visual.
Yep.
But I remember watching this for the first time and it's like a great jump scare.
It is.
There's like a great shrill, we'll talk about it in music in a second, but there's a great like sound effect and like quick strike of some kind of string or something, and then this big red thing. You don't even, again, until he takes the shirt off in the next scene, you're still not quite aware what's happening. You see this big red thing protrude from his chest. It's really, really striking.
Yeah, really, really neat. And that whole sequence is funny because Batman explains it away that he's hesitant because Superman is the greatest hero to ever live, and then has to correct himself because he's talking to Batman, the former Batman, and says, one of them. But I think it's funny that he kind of pulls out the kryptonite and then he gets immediate butterfingers and loses the kryptonite in the grate because he gets it knocked out of his hands. It's like, this is a series of unfortunate events that have occurred here. So we do get that fight there between them. Then when Batman is finally able to get the kryptonite to use on Superman later, once they've joined it at the Fortress of Solitude, it's a little bit more impactful. It was also interesting because I was like, oh, is this another one of the robots? And he pulls out the kryptonite. Somehow Batman knew that this Superman, maybe because he talked, I don't know, wasn't a robot. The one that he pulls the kryptonite on eventually. So I liked that. I do like the fact that they did the flashback with all of the Superman, the animated series footage. Again, that's really cool because
I assume they reused the boards because I didn't pull up the old scene. It's obviously redone because it's in digital color and everything, so it was obviously updated. But I assume they just used those boards and then just had Coco and Dong Ying reanimate it for the sequence.
Yeah, from everything that I can remember, the only thing, I think the sequence where the Preserver gets launched into space is like a little bit little bit longer. I feel like he's hanging on longer, and then like there's
and I think Lobo does something in that,
yes,
like to knock him back towards the door or something. Like there's a little bit more Lobo in that final sequence, I'm pretty sure.
Either way, though, yeah, it's cool that it's. I don't know if it's a shot for shot. I'd be interested in pulling that up. Maybe that's something we can do for our. I'll try and do for our social media this week, but line up a shot for shot to see how close it is to matching up for the episode. But yeah, really neat that they decided to include that again, making you feel like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like I remember exactly the scene when this happened, and it's interesting because you can go back and see Starro. If you go back to the episode, you can see Starro there. We mentioned that when we reviewed that episode in the archives. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. I think that the sequence of all the Starros kind of rushing and fully encapsulating Batman as he's in the tank, that scene is always extremely memorable for me, as these hundreds and hundreds of Starros attach themselves to him, and he's just sort of floating there towards the bottom of the tank. And then at the last second, he's able to reach for his belt and electrify the suit. I really, really like the visual of that, especially as he's sort of like floating there. Starts out with one Starro, and then suddenly there's more and more and more, and then he's just kind of floating through the water there. You just see his ears sticking out and his body floating towards the bottom until he's able to hit the belt. But I really enjoyed that sequence there. What else? I'm sure there's probably more that I have here, but I don't want to take everything. What did you like about the visuals, and what stuck out to you?
I mean, I think the first sequence that really sticks out to me is that bit at the end. We already talked about it in plot, but where Terry goes under the water as Superman's kind of dealing with the rest of the league to tussle with Aquagirl and try to prevent her from opening up the doors to let the starfish out. That whole sequence is really cool. Like their little underwater fight is neat. The bit where like the thousands of starfish cover up Terry is like real good and like almost hard. Like it's hard to make a giant starfish with one eye look scary, but I think they do a pretty decent job of like making it feel like really claustrophobic and frightening. I guess kind of like the face hugger thing from Aliens again.
Yep.
But, so I like that sequence a lot. I like that like the Starro eye. I feel like usually you just see it and it's just the starfish with the big eye, and that's kind of like this. These Starros are like real expressive with that one eye. Like when the Justice League is kind of menacing at Terry, they're all like furrowing their unibrow on their one eye, like they're all kind of making a mean Starro face at him, which I think is kind of a fun bit. Like they managed to make Starro, which is still just a starfish with one big red eye in the center, a little bit more expressive than I feel like I usually see him when I see that character pop up in a comic book. So I thought that was kind of a clever way to show like some emotion for that this character that doesn't speak or have a mouth or any other ability to express other than that one eye. So I thought they did a decent job of making the Starro and the millions of little starfish feel kind of menacing, despite being, a starfish.
Right. No, it is very creepy, especially the main one that's on Superman. I felt like they did what they could to make that one very expressive in the way that it moves. And even when that the Batman uses the giant Bat-Mobile harpoon, as you titled it, to rip the thing off of it, even if it's sitting there on the ground being electrocuted and kind of wriggling in the midst of it, very, very, very alien creepy vibes from that. So I did enjoy that. I thought that the Batmobile crash, I don't know, maybe it was just because it was set in the snow, but I got some Empire Strikes Back vibes when the Batmobile crashes, similar to the scene where the snow speeder crashes in the snow against the AT-AT walkers in Empire Strikes Back, with the crash there, and then some of the looking out of the from the viewpoint of Batman through the windshield, or looking at Superman. When they get to I also really, really liked when they got to the Fortress of Solitude, and you first see what you think is Superman standing in the shadows, and he's completely in shadow, and then he kind of begins flying towards them. And I thought that was done super well too. Again, something straight out of a horror movie, very creepy. You don't even see his face. It's just completely shadowed. And then you find out, of course, that it's a robot when they rip its head off to kill it. But yeah, I think the only other thing that I had noted here is in that chase sequence is Superman is chasing the Batmobile. I like that Superman isn't even flying. Like, he's flying. The Batmobile is going Mach 3 or whatever Bruce says it can go, and Superman isn't even arms out, legs behind him. He's just floating, flying behind the Batmobile and shooting the heat vision as if it's not even like it's not. It's just it's not. He's not even going to break a sweat doing this. And then the sequence where, as he's following the Batmobile there's a missile that drops out of the Batmobile to fire behind it. You follow the missile all the way until it crashes into Superman. I think it's a reused creeper explosion again for the actual explosion. But then they cut back to the interior of the Batmobile, and the whole interior is lit with front lighting as Batman sort of looking behind him at the explosion. It lights up the interior of the Batmobile, and you get this real surprised expression. And then, of course, Superman flies through the explosion. So, but I thought that was a pretty unique aerial sequence there for them. And then once Superman and Batman come back in, and they begin trying to rip the Starros off of the other Leaguers. There's a little fight sequence that happens between Warhawk and Superman that's choreographed really well. Like, they fly towards each other and they're kind of punching each other, and they kind of get the best of each other, and then they break up, and then they come back together, and Superman is trying to get the Starro off of Warhawk, and Warhawk has another Starro in his hand, and he kind of is launching the Starro towards Superman. And I thought that whole sequence was choreographed really, really well, and animated really well too. Yeah, so for all of that, and I think just the uptick in at least hand-to-hand combat action, it wasn't as good, I think, as the first episode. I wasn't as impressed with it, but there was still a lot to be enjoyed as far as the visuals were concerned. So I ended up sticking with my 8 out of 10 as far as visuals were concerned. What about you?
Yeah, same. I also had given my tentative 8, and I'm keeping it right there. Yeah, there's not a lot I can add. I think that sequence in the chase in the snow is really cool. I can't think of too many episodes that take place in like a snowstorm,
right?
So I think that's like a really unique backdrop for this chase between Superman and Batman. I think that's a lot of fun. Yeah, the scene when Superman's getting electrocuted and we go inside his mind for a second, and you see the giant Starro wrapped around him, is really, really cool as like a visualization of him breaking free of the mind control or whatever. So yeah, they come up with some really neat visual tricks again to show off how this sort of vaguely defined mind control starfish works. So yeah, they do a lot of cool stuff with that, and it's a pretty unique. Yeah, having the last 2 acts of the episode all take place in the fortress and out in the snow is a lot of fun.
There we go. All right, Liam, let's take it on to our next category, which is going to be music. And once again, Christopher Carter responsible for the music for this week's episode. Man, we get some more wonderful music here for this episode. I'll let you start with this because I talked a lot for visuals. What stood out for you? What did you like as far as the music was concerned for this week's episode?
I think the first one that came to mind, we talked about a little bit about how in part 1 there's hints of the Shirley Walker Superman theme used. It's brought back in a very specific way. In this one, during that chase sequence you already mentioned, as Terry asks Bruce, is Mach 3 faster than a speeding bullet? And then we sort of see him peering over his shoulder, and we just see Superman leering towards him, as you said, flying upright, completely straight. It's so off kilter, and the theme is played in this very odd minor key that and it's played on like some sort of, I don't know if it's a trombone or something, but it's just this really, it just sounds so odd. You could tell it's the Superman theme, and it even kind of still has that dun 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 behind it, but it's the actual melody of it is played in this really off kilter odd key that just makes it really unsettling and makes it feel really creepy when he's hovering towards Batman like that. So it's a
Some
really, really great job.
some extra percussion there too. I'm sure you appreciated that as a drummer, but you really hear that, like the drum, and I think maybe it's because it's more of the rocked up drums as opposed to the standard symphonic or orchestral drums that they typically used for the Shirley Walker theme. So it's a little bit more of the rocked up version, but you hear it. It feels like a marching a little bit, especially as Superman's kind of flying behind the Batmobile. But yeah, I would agree with you. That stuck out as one of mine as well.
Absolutely. And then yeah, I liked there's actually, I think the fight music that kicks off right as the Superman kind of reveals everything when they're still in the Watchtower, I think is fun. And then again when they're fighting in the fortress with the robots and everything, I enjoy that. And then as like I said, as Terry's kind of struggling with Marina under the water, I think all the starfish jump on him. I think that's a really some really good beat there. And they instead of using the Superman theme when Superman finally pulls Starro off of him, I think they more go back to that Justice League theme, proto theme that we heard in part one, which is I like that. I like that theme. It's hard to compare it when we have the later Ritmanis and later Michael McCuistion's Justice League and JLU themes, but both great pieces of music there. So I like that the triumphant returns as Superman kind of wakes up and stands up ready to get back in the fight there as a good guy is fun as well.
Yeah. You mentioned it when we were talking about it in visuals, but the reveal for the initial reveal for Starro, there is a sort of a shriek horror movie style, nails on the chalkboard type sound effect that happens once the Starro eye pops out of Superman's chest. And, that really, like, I guess watching this as a kid, I didn't get the sort of homages and the visual callbacks to some of the classic horror films or monster movies of the day. So I like now understanding those references a little bit more. I appreciated the fact that they made that feel more like a jump scare with that with that particular piece. When Batman finally saves Marina in the tank, he comes out and we get a version of the Batman Beyond theme as like the heroic. He saved the day. He saved her from dying. He's pulling her out of the water, keeping her from being crushed by the falling rock. So we get it's not played in the traditional Batman key, but I think it's later. I want to say they probably used it later on for the Return of the Joker movie. But I enjoyed hearing that in that sequence. And then the chase sequence, again, as you mentioned, that one was one that I had written down. And then the fight sequences, of course, there's plenty of just traditional Beyond music that's kind of played there with electric guitars and strumming and some percussion and all of that. So we both had our temporary scores set at 10 out of 10 for music, and personally, I don't think that anything in this episode did anything to dissuade me from that score, which is why I ended up settling on a perfect 10 out of 10 for music. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, I went with the exact same score. As I said, I also had a 10 at the end of part one, and I'm keeping it right there for our final score here as well.
There we are. So we've agreed on the last two scores, and we've actually stayed with our original scores for our last two scores. So we'll see if our fourth score, if it differs, or if we'll keep holding pat just as we did with the last two. But of course, we will move on to our final category of the day, and that will be voice acting. We covered a lot of the actors, actually all of the actors in the first episode. So you can run down. We don't have to go through their histories again, but we can certainly talk about their individual performances here as we go through, in any particular lines, of course, as we talk about our voice actors and actresses.
That's right, Cal. So yeah, I will. You can go back and listen to our review of part one if you want to hear a little bit more in detail. But recapping, we have Peter Onorati as Warhawk. We have Lauren Tom as Green Lantern. She gets a little bit more to do this week because she gets to be part of the exposition squad.
Yeah.
But I also like there's a little bit of banter between Cairo and Warhawk. Like I feel like you see a little bit more of the camaraderie between the teammates in part two.
Yep.
At least in
Which is
that,
cool,
that one
especially
scene. Like,
especially when I was gonna say, especially when you know Warhawk's backstory, it's cool that he's friends with the Green Lantern.
yes, of course, that would be a natural pairing.
Yep.
Yeah, so they kind of are busting each other's chops as Cairo points out that he's not usually as smart enough to think of something like he did, putting the Armo on remote control. But yes, we once again have Miss Farrah Fork as Barda. She probably gets the most due, other than maybe Jodie Benson as Aquagirl in this part two. As far as she's got a lot of it is a lot of her being like she gets the part where she gets to argue with Terry at the start, and then she kind of has a lot of dialogue sort of bouncing off of Warhawk, and then later with Christopher McDonald as Superman, as they're talking about whether or not they should bury the river door so that nothing can get out, and how that could trap Batman down there. As mentioned, Christopher McDonald as Superman. Jodie Benson as Aquagirl. She gets a little bit more to do because she's got to narrate our recap of, or our explanation, our origin story for Starro and for the Preserver and the Intergalactic Zoo and all that good stuff. And then we have our main characters. Obviously, our villain doesn't speak, so it does come down to kind of Christopher McDonald as Superman. Once he's revealed, I feel like he takes a little bit even more of his humanity. Like if you compare it to that scene in the Bat Cave in part one, where he and Bruce are kind of shooting the breeze, to how he is when he's speaking very, matter of factly of, just join us. You have nowhere to run. Like he's very cold and unfeeling. Like it feels like there's even a level dropped out as far as like the emotion, which makes sense because at that point Starro has no reason to try to pretend to be him. Like everyone understands now that it's Starro is just speaking through him. So I thought Mr. McDonald did a pretty good job as far as trying to visual or vocalize Starro speaking through him in those scenes, so he has a little bit less emotion versus when he once the starfish is removed at the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talked about whether or not it does take a little bit to warm up to it, but I think by the end of the episode, it does feel authentically Superman. And even if it's not, you could almost explain it away that because he's under the guy or under the control of the Starro, where he feels a little bit more, pun intended, alien for the first 3/4 of the episode. So, I appreciate it. Again, a part of me wishes that we could have had Tim Daly voice him, but we talked about that 2 weeks ago as to why they ended up going with him and the purpose behind it. And I think ultimately he did a fine job as Superman.
Agreed. And then we have a little bit briefly. I don't know if I assume they just got Wayne Brady to record Micron's grunts when he was in for part one.
He sure did.
Because he doesn't actually speak in part two, though he is, as I said, he briefly joins in on the fight with Superman at the Metro Tower. But and then yes, of course, we have our two leads, Kevin Conroy as Bruce Wayne. Less to do for him this week, as mentioned, because it's much more of an action focused episode. He does have a couple, like I said, of fun moments. I like the back and forth between him and Will Friedle when Terry's basically explaining what's going on. He's like, "What do I do?" And Bruce just says, like, "I could call in an airstrike." He's like, "I don't." He's like, "That's," and Terry kind of tries to push back on it, and Bruce is just like, "That's their job. That's the way this ends. Is with." Burying this, that's before they realize they can get the starfish off of all of them. That's like, well, that's how this is going to end, because we gotta make sure these starfish can't get out. I don't know how that would stop Superman, or why they couldn't.
I think maybe more or less he was saying that like Batman was the only option that they really had here. Right. So nut up and let's go.
Yes, I think that is sort of the idea. He's like the only other option is to drop a nuke on it, I guess. So yes, there's a little bit for Kevin Conroy to do. Will Friedle gets a lot to do. He's very good. Like I said, there's it feels like there's evolution even from part one, where he's standing up for himself a little bit more forcefully against Barda in that first scene. His back and forth, and that you mentioned the scene where he's talking to Bruce, and Bruce is like, "Well, why did you hesitate?" And he says, "Well, the guy's the greatest hero of all time. Well, one of them." Like there's like a funny little back and forth where he's fighting his own sort of hero worship in that moment, and then by the end, in that final scene, as we already talked about, that references future events, that moment where he sort of accepts the lonely road of Batman as he turns down this membership that he was so awestruck and excited to even receive, to even be around these people at first. He's now like, you know what? I don't know if Batman fits in this club. So I think we get to see a little bit of an evolution of like confidence in Terry throughout this episode, and I think Mr. Friedle's performance, unsurprisingly perhaps, adds a lot to that. And you feel like he's a bit more mature and a bit more he's a better Batman than he was at the start of the episode.
100%, yes, because you remember the first scene with him and Superman in the cave. He's just completely in awe, and then as you mentioned, him being hesitant to take on one of the world's greatest heroes. And then, talking about how all of these people are heroes to him and have been since his childhood and all of that. So, for him to be able to kind of stand up as a man himself at the end and be like, as cool as that would be, like, it's just not for me. Like I'm a hero that belongs, in Gotham. So yeah, I agree with you. And I think that the performance certainly communicates that very well.
Absolutely. So yeah, with that in mind, I think I sat right where I was at my 8 out of 10. I think everybody does a pretty darn good job. Like I said, you kind of settle into Christopher McDonald as a Superman, even though he's not one we were familiar with up to this point between Tim Daly and George Newbern. But and then the rest of the leaguers, they're serviceable. Like I said, I like there's a little bit more, you get a little bit more camaraderie between the teammates in this episode, a little bit more of them discussing things amongst themselves. But I just thought I would kind of keep it where it was at the 8 out of 10.
Yeah, same. I'm standing pat with mine. I had a 9 out of 10, and I'm going to keep it there. I think everybody does a good enough job here in the second episode. Nobody, I think, did poorly. I think what's asked of them, there's a lot more exposition, a lot more dialogue in the second episode. So everybody kind of stands pat and does as good a job as they did in the first episode. And I think it's a testament to our entire cast there. Another home run from Andrea Romano as far as casting is concerned with everybody involved here. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap things up here. So let's go ahead and total up our scores. So with our scores now being finalized, I can total everything up with a total ended up being 34 out of 40 for me. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm just a couple points lower. Again, don't think it's a disagreement alarm worthy, but at a 31 out of 40.
Yeah, and I think that despite maybe this is one of the episodes that you would think would end up being in the top picks section based on just the importance and the impact that it would lead you to believe. But I think that's why we do the reviews. That's why we break them down and we look at them so seriously, and also why we introduce the idea of rewatchability here, because this is one, despite not hitting all of the marks that we maybe would have assumed that they would have, maybe the plot letting us down a little bit in a couple of places, or the animation and visuals, wishing it was a little bit different in a certain area, or more of one thing or the other. I feel like this is one that we undeniably have to say is a must watch, because it's the precursor to what would eventually be timeline wise before this, but ultimately chronologically after this, as far as the series production is concerned. So to me, this gets 2 thumbs up, just because obviously it's Superman's one and only appearance in the future here. It's a a neat thing. It's probably the question that you'd been asking since the beginning of the DC of the Batman Beyond run, which is where's Superman? What's he up to these days?
Mm-hmm.
That and whatever happened to Dick Grayson, I think, were probably both asked of Bruce Timm a lot. So, yeah, I think
we know Bruce had no interest in answering the latter. So at least we got the former answered.
that's right, exactly. So I'd give this one 2 thumbs up easily for rewatchability. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like I said, this is a seminal episode. It means a lot to the character within the show. Obviously, the Justice League doesn't come back in the few remaining episodes of Batman Beyond we have left, but meeting a character that from the pre-existing series, like you said, from a production standpoint, it's hugely significant. Being the first Justice League story that this team of writers and producers and directors ever did. It's massively important, and like we said, it sets up some things for down the line with that little postscript at the end with Superman. It's very important, and it connects the show back to the original series that they spawned from. So yeah, definitely a double thumbs up there.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And don't forget, we'd love your support for the podcast, and you can do so several different ways. The first of which, of course, is following us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter/X and Instagram. That's where you can also interact with us. We are posting there on both platforms very regularly, and love to interact with fans, getting people's thoughts on different DCAU stuff. Not only just the Batman Beyond stuff, but everything else that's happening in the DCAU, this universe that somehow is still kicking some 30 plus years after it originally debuted. So lots of things to talk about seemingly on a daily basis when it comes to the DCAU. So join in the conversation and follow us there. You can also support the podcast by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. So wherever you're listening to us, if it allows you a subscription option, subscribe to us there. It leaves you an option to leave a review. You can leave a 5-star review. That helps us. And then if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and leave a little podcast review blurb, you can then we read it on the air here, and we'll send you a thank you gift if you live in the continental United States. So leave us a review there if you want to, and then of course, if you're listening to us on the Pod Tower on YouTube, you can like those videos, subscribe to the Pod Tower, and check out the other podcasts that are also streaming on that channel as well. And then last but not least, check out the show notes. There is a link there to our store. You can get yourself a piece of merchandise right then and there, or you can become a monthly supporter, just like several listeners are. They give their hard-earned cash to help support the podcast, and to just send some appreciation for the work that we do. We appreciate our subscribers and people that support us on a monthly basis. And if you want to join them, check out the show notes. Liam, unfortunately, this episode has come to an end, and I say unfortunately because we know what awaits us next week. And that is, unfortunately, more Zeta Project.
More than ever before, in fact.
What's worse than one Zeta Project episode, you say? That's right, 2 Zeta Project episodes. What's the most inconceivable thing you could possibly think about being worse than that? That's right. For the first time ever in the history, another historic DCAU episode also involving the Zeta Project. It's the first ever DCAU review triple feature next week.
That's right. It's a triple play baseball 2002. So as it turns out, the last episode of the first season, which trivia note, was held off to be the premiere of the second season. So that's one episode. And then the actual season 2 premiere is a 2-parter. And we thought, well, so we could review one and then half review part 1. I was like, well, that's dumb. So we're just going to press ahead. The plot recaps might be a little bit scant to save some time, but we are in fact reviewing 3 episodes. That is Absolute Zero and then Wired parts 1 and 2 next week. The only good news is that once we conquered that Brobdingnagian task, we will only have about 6 episodes where we have to cover the Zeta Project left, if they're all double features. So,
in the meantime, please pray for us. If you're a praying person, please pray for us next week. If you're not a praying person, send us some positive vibes, because it's going to be our Mount Everest.
I gotta find a new meme clip. I can't use the one of the Young Bucks super kicking Sting 3 episodes.
Oh my goodness.
I gotta find something else I gotta find a thing where 3 guys attack 1 guy. If anyone has any suggestions, let me know.
Maybe just use the clip from The Matrix with the only thing I can think of. It's gonna be a disaster, but it's gonna be entertaining. You won't want to miss it. And until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you next week. If you join us, please join us for the next episode of the DCAU review. Better make it.
Bye-bye.
Sounds like a threat.